You are accused of witchcraft and sorcery, and having an intercourse with spirits in the supernatural kind, all which has proved mere deception and wickedness. So the judge would say, in a courtroom in York, to a woman who had already taken everything from Rebecca Perigo, her trust, her belongings, and finally, her life. But on the morning the puddings tasted wrong, Rebecca did not yet know any of this. She only knew the cramping had begun. Hello everyone, before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. It was the spring of 1807, in the Bramley district of Leeds, in the West Riding of Yorkshire. The air carried the damp of an English May coal smoke drifting low over the rooftops, the creak of cartwheels on the lane outside, the distant clang of a smithy at work. Inside a modest home lived William and Rebecca Perigo, a comfortably situated, childless, middle-aged couple. For nearly a year, Rebecca had eaten her supper, believing it would cure her. She believed, as her doctor himself had told her, that she was under some manner of spell, haunted, so she said, by a black dog and other unseen tormentors. On this particular evening, William prepared the pudding as instructed, a small packet of powder stirred carefully into the mixture, just as the letters from the mysterious Mrs. Blythe had commanded. The couple ate together, as they always did, but on this sixth day, something was different. The taste was wrong, bitter, unfamiliar. Within the hour, both husband and wife were doubled with cramps. Rebecca had been promised that she would be healed. Instead, by morning, she would be dying, and the woman responsible was someone the Perigos had trusted as their salvation. To understand how Rebecca Perigo came to eat a poisoned pudding, believing it her cure, one must first understand the woman who prepared the powder. Mary Bateman was born Mary Harker in 1768 in the village of Assenby in the North Riding of Yorkshire. Her father was a farmer, and the family was, by most accounts, respectable. From a young age, however, Mary showed an inclination toward theft, small things, often items she did not need. At 13, she was sent into service as a domestic servant, perhaps in the hope that discipline and labour might correct her habits. It did not. She was dismissed from one household, and then another, until her reputation as a thief had spread too widely for her to find further employment in the area. She moved first to York, and then, after a burglary, fled to Leeds. There, she found steady work as a mantua maker, a dressmaker of some skill, and for a time, this trade alone might have sustained her. But dressmaking paid little, and Mary, ever resourceful, began to supplement her income as a fortune-teller. In an age when belief in witchcraft and the supernatural still held real currency among the poor and the desperate, this was a far safer trade than theft. Theft, after all, was punishable by hanging. In 1792, Mary married John Bateman, a wheelwright. Their courtship was brief, and the marriage produced children, though little is recorded of their early life together. John, it is said, grew weary of his wife's constant frauds and the trouble they brought, and joined the militia, leaving Mary to fend largely for herself and her family. By the turn of the century, Mary had settled into a pattern. She told fortunes, she sold potions, said to cure illness and ward off evil. She invented clients who did not exist, and intermediaries who lived only on paper. One such invention, a fictitious wise woman she called Mrs. Blythe, said to reside in Scarborough, would, within a few short years, lead her into the home of William and Rebecca Perigo. The records do not show exactly when Rebecca Perigo's troubles began, only that by the spring of 1806 she had grown convinced that something unnatural afflicted her. She suffered a fluttering in the chest whenever she lay down to sleep, and believed herself haunted by a black dog and other spirits. Her physician, unable to offer relief, told her plainly that he suspected she was under some manner of spell, a diagnosis that, in the Yorkshire of that era, was not so easily dismissed as it might be today. At Whitsuntide that year, The Perigos were visited by their niece, who had heard of a woman in Leeds said to possess the power to lift such curses. A meeting was arranged outside the Black Dog public house, an irony, perhaps, that none of them remarked upon at the time. Mary Bateman listened to Rebecca's complaints with practiced sympathy and explained that she herself held no power. She was merely a messenger for the wise woman Mrs. Blythe, who resided in Scarborough. What followed was a slow and methodical extraction. William Perigo was asked first for an item of Rebecca's underclothing to be sent to Mrs. Blythe for her to work upon. Then came guinea notes, sewn by Mary's own skilled needle into the corners of Rebecca's bed, where they were to remain untouched for 18 months. Then came instructions to nail horseshoes to the door. Then cheese, china, silverware, tea and sugar, a bed and bedclothes, each request arriving by letter from Mrs. Blythe, and each letter, without exception, ordered burnt the moment it was read. The pattern repeated itself, request after request, burnt letter after burnt letter, until no evidence remained but Mary's word. William visited her regularly to receive each new instruction. He never once saw Mrs. Blythe. No one ever had. It is not known whether William or Rebecca ever questioned why a woman with such power over spirits required quite so many earthly comforts, cheese, sugar, silverware, but the letters continued, and the Perigos continued to obey them, for William wished, above all else, for his wife to be cured. The final letter from Mrs. Blythe carried a warning. Illness was coming to the Perigo household. To prevent it, Rebecca was to take ½ pound of honey to Mary, who would mix it with a special medicine. The couple were then to eat a pudding each day for 6 days, into which a packet of powder supplied by Mary herself was to be stirred. Only one pudding was to be made daily. No one else was to taste it. Any portion left over was to be destroyed at once. And should illness come regardless, the letter instructed, they were not to send for a doctor, for he would be powerless to help. For 5 days, the Perigos ate the puddings without apparent harm. On the 6th day, the taste had changed. Within the hour, both husband and wife were seized with violent stomach cramps and vomiting. As instructed, no physician was called for Rebecca. She died on the 24th of May, 1807. William, weakened but alive, did at last send for a doctor who suspected poison, though no post-mortem examination was carried out at that time. Mary, undeterred by Rebecca's death, continued to write as Mrs. Blythe, still demanding payment, still promising a cure for William's own lingering illness. It was William who, in time, grew suspicious. He recalled the small silk purses sewn into his late wife's bed, each said to contain guinea notes and gold coin, untouched for 18 months as instructed. He opened them. Inside, he found not money, but cabbage leaves and copper coin. The deception, so carefully maintained for nearly 2 years, had begun to unravel. William arranged one final meeting with Mary, ostensibly to purchase a further bottle of medicine, but he had already been to the local constable. At that meeting, Mary sold him a bottle containing oatmeal and arsenic. The constable, present and watching, took her into custody without delay. A search of her home turned up many of the very items the Perigos had handed over to Mrs. Blythe over the preceding 2 years, proof, at last, that Mrs. Blythe had never existed at all. The case against Mary Bateman rested upon 2 pillars of evidence, both unusually precise for the era. The first was the handwriting itself. Investigators compared the letters supposedly sent by Mrs. Blythe of Scarborough against samples of Mary's own hand, and found them identical. It was further discovered that Mary had arranged for the letters to be carried to Scarborough and posted back to Leeds, so that they might bear the correct postmark and lend false credibility to a woman who had never set foot in that town. A search by constables in Scarborough confirmed what the handwriting already suggested. No Mrs. Blythe had ever resided there. The second pillar was chemical. A surviving sample of the honey Rebecca had been instructed to bring for mixing into her medicine was analysed by a chemist named Mr. Chorley. His examination found the honey to contain mercuric chloride, a substance of considerable toxicity, and one entirely consistent with the violent stomach cramps and vomiting suffered by both Rebecca and William in the days before her death. Together, the handwriting and the poison formed a chain that left little room for innocent explanation. The fictitious missus, Blythe, the burnt letters, the cabbage leaves sewn in place of coin, each piece, examined individually, might have seemed the work of mere fraud. Assembled together, they pointed towards something far graver. The case being prepared against Mary Bateman was no longer simply one of theft and deception, the very crimes that had occupied much of her adult life. It was now a case of willful murder. If you're finding this case as compelling as we are, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us continue researching and sharing these forgotten stories from history. We also read every comment, so let us know your thoughts on this case below. Now, let's continue. Following her arrest, Mary appeared before the magistrates the very next day, formally charged with the murder of Rebecca Perigo. A search of her home had already produced the silverware, china, and other items the Perigos believed they had sent to Mrs. Blythe. Mary denied any involvement in Rebecca's death, maintaining, as she would continue to maintain, that she was innocent of murder. She was remanded into custody to await trial at the Yorkshire Lent Assizes, which were to open at York Castle the following March. The trial of Mary Bateman opened at York Castle on Friday, the 17th of March, 1809, before the judge, Sir Simon Le Blanc. The proceedings lasted some 12 hours. The court examining in close detail the handwriting evidence linking Mary to the letters of Mrs. Blythe, the postal arrangement designed to deceive, and the forensic findings of Mr. Chorley regarding the mercuric chloride discovered in the honey. Mary's defence was simple denial. She offered no explanation for the handwriting, no account of the poison, no answer as to why a woman who did not exist had directed the Perigos' every action for nearly 2 years. She maintained, as she had from the moment of her arrest, that she had played no part in Rebecca's death. In his summation, Sir Simon Le Blanc instructed the jury with care. To return a verdict of guilty, he told them, they must be satisfied on 3 points: that Rebecca Perigo had died of poisoning, that the poison had been administered with Mary's knowledge, and that it had been administered with the intention of causing her death. He reminded the jury, too, that the overwhelming evidence of Mary's fraud against the Perigos did not, by itself, prove her guilty of murder. The 2 charges, though connected, were not the same. The jury did not deliberate long. The evidence of both fraud and murder was, the court found, overwhelming. The verdict was guilty. Asked, as was customary, whether she had anything to say before sentence was passed, Mary told the judge, with tears in her eyes, that she was pregnant. Sir Simon Le Blanc ordered the courtroom doors locked and summoned a jury of matrons, married women drawn from among the spectators to examine her. Several of the ladies present attempted to leave rather than serve, but the locked doors held them in place. The examination concluded that Mary was not, in fact, with child. The judge proceeded to sentence. She was to be hanged, and afterward dissected. The sentence would be carried out the following Monday. Mary Bateman spent her final days in the condemned cell at York Castle, with her infant child beside her. The night before her execution, she wrote to her husband, enclosing her wedding ring and asking that it be given to their daughter. In this same letter, she admitted to some of her many frauds, though she continued, to the very end, to deny any part in Rebecca Perigo's murder. A Leeds newspaper later reported that even in her final days, she continued telling fortunes to fellow inmates in exchange for a guinea. At 5 o'clock in the morning on Monday, the 20th of March, 1809, Mary was taken from her cell. She paused beside her sleeping infant and kissed the child for the last time, showing, it was recorded, no outward sign of emotion at the parting. She was led to the gallows behind York Castle, overlooking St. George's Fields, where the hangman known as William Mutton Curry waited to carry out the sentence. She was hanged alongside Joseph Brown, convicted separately of murder. An estimated crowd of several thousand had gathered to witness it, some accounts placing the number as high as 20,000, many having walked from Leeds itself, drawn by a widespread belief that a woman with such reputed powers might yet somehow escape the rope. She did not. Her body was carried back toward Leeds, and crowds lined the road from York to watch the coffin pass. At Leeds General Infirmary, her corpse was given over to dissection, the surgeons there charging members of the public threepence each to view her remains. Some £30 was raised for the hospital in this way. In the days that followed, strips of her skin were reportedly tanned and sold as charms against evil, and the tip of her tongue was said to have been kept by the governor of Ripon Prison. Her skeleton, together with a plaster cast taken of her face, was for many years displayed at the Thackeray Medical Museum in Leeds, before being moved to Leeds University in 2015. The episode of the prophetic hen, in which she had inscribed eggs with the words, "Christ is coming," and charged the curious a penny to view them, would later be cited by the writer Charles Mackay as an example of the credulity that can grip an ordinary public. Rebecca Perigo's name, by contrast, is remembered today largely through the woman who killed her. She left behind no memorial that history has recorded, only the account of a final illness endured in the belief that healing, not harm, was coming to her in a borrowed spoon of honey. In the registers of York Castle, the file on Mary Bateman remains a record of fraud upon fraud, ending at last in the one crime from which there could be no further deception,